Ahead before we do the old red wine, skip ahead to the first point under these sources of off aromas. I have listed cork taint, TCA contamination. TCA stands for trichloroanisole. That's what you're smelling. It's an off flavor, and what happens is naturally present in corks are these microorganisms. Cork is a natural product, right? It comes off a tree. Generally, most of it's grown in Portugal. Sometimes they have this bacteria in there, and one of the metabolites of the bacteria is this trichloroanisole. So when you get that cork, when the manufacturer gets a fresh cork, there's no way to know that there's TCA in that cork. There is some tests. When I was in New Zealand, actually, we did tests where we took 20 containers and we put alcohol and acid, like an artificial wine solution, and we put corks from, samples from the batch, and we let them sit for a day, and then we smelled each one, and you could extract some of it out, and if like a certain amount failed, they would reject the batch and get another one. But so this is just a fabulous example. TCA smells like exactly what you're smelling, like a musty basement, wet cardboard. And I always love to show this to people because so many people always ask me, "What is a corked wine?" Wow, once you've smelled it, you probably won't forget it.
Excuse me, Dan. I read at some point that what actually triggers the formation of that, the chemical reaction is when the cork is bleached with this bleaching agent, that the microbes present and moisture, is that?
I've read that as well, because when they bleach, if they bleach with I don't think they use chlorine, but they'll use something that has chlorine atom in it, and that's why trichloro is chloro is chlorine. So the bacteria probably metabolize that bleaching agent and produce the TCA. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the O4s. Yeah, they're really wonderful wines. Yeah. So, wow, that was just a killer example. Awesome.
Nice job, Greg.
Yeah. Great opening, Greg.
Actually, we have to thank Paul in the back for pulling the right wine.
So sorry we couldn't compare them just on age alone, but there's another valuable lesson there. And now.
Yeah, so make sure you don't pour it into the tainted glass.
Yeah. Yeah, be very careful actually when we pass the red wine around. Don't pour it into that glass that has the corked wine, or you'll ruin it. So we don't have a young version as a comparison. I don't think opening in one of the 06 Pegao wines is really something we want to do. Well, we may want to do it, but
You're okay.
But we have a 1998 Domaine Pegao Chateauneuf, which could be a real treat. Oh, and there may be another lesson in this one as well.
There's mold on top of it. You're sensitive to that, aren't you?
I picked it up right away, John.
The palate.
It's actually pretty nice. There is another one of our off aromas that we can talk about here, but it's not too bad.
Better than Macy's.
So some of the things you get in aged red wines often are some of the aromas that people commonly discuss. Would be things like aged leather, meat. Meat is a really common one, especially in old Napa Valley Cab. When I worked out there, we did some tastings of some really old vintages, and we had a couple of French interns that were with us, and they smelled this wine and they got really excited and they were like talking to each other. Oh, it's blah blah blah. I didn't know what they were saying, but what they were smelling is that apparently this common smell. If you're a game bird hunter, after you go out and you shoot all your birds and you bring them back and you hang them in your shed or whatever, there's this particular smell of a dead game bird, and they were like, "It's exactly what it smells like."
Hey, it's a dead game bird.
And I was like, "Okay, well, I haven't smelled a dead game bird, but." So these are the sort of mushrooms. Is another thing you often get out of it, not in an unpleasant way necessarily, but especially old Burgundy. People often talk about truffles or mushrooms or underbrush, earthy sort of aromas. And some of these things sound like a turnoff, but I think when in the entire, taken as a whole in the bouquet, they can be really interesting if they're not overpowering. also get a little color lesson in this, if you remember from John's. Look at that color. Kind of, I think it's going a little bit beyond brick and it's starting to get a little brown.
Thank you.
So I think I get a couple of the things listed under the aged red wine aromas in here. It's kind of interesting. Why don't you guys scream out some, be bold if you smell something
I think I was
interesting.
definitely getting mushrooms.
Yeah, so do I. Definitely.
Socks.
Socks.
Did you get some balsamic?
Balsamic, definitely, right?
Yeah, balsamic. This is also a good time to talk about letter C on the off aromas in wine. I think this wine has a little bit of what we call Brett. Brettanomyces is a genus of yeast. It's a spoilage yeast generally, although ironically in beer, it's a positive thing. There are a lot of Brett-aged beers where it's considered a positive, but it's usually considered a negative in wine, especially if it's too powerful. And I get a little Band-Aid. You get that? Like the smell of, I don't know if Band-Aids smell like that anymore, but when I was a kid, they kind of had that medicinal Band-Aid-y kind of smell. It's not too bad though. I mean, in a way, it's almost pleasant.
This is Grenache primarily. So
Yeah.
from your primary, you can
Yeah.
descriptors in your mind. You can see how they've.
Yeah. And when this wine is young, it's going to be fresh red fruits and big bright red fruit flavors. And now you're getting these sort of really interesting, complex. I'm not spitting this one. What do you think? Interesting, right? How many of you have had a wine with this much age on it? Oh, I know. Or how many of you haven't? Is what I'm going to say. Is this the first time you're tasting anything that's mature like this?
This is one of the great wines of Chateau Neuf de Pop,
Yeah.
and a great vintage. So it's this is
year
doing
is it?
well.
1998.
98.
Yeah. I think there may have been a little bit of you can see on the cork that the wine has come all the way up from the bottom where it touched the wine to the top. Sometimes that's a negative, because if wine comes out, it means air can get in. So there may be a little oxidation that shouldn't be there, but overall I think the wine's in pretty good condition.